So I haven't met Carla until the session she's just done, but I think we're probably soul brothers and soul sisters or something. So although you've kindly sold me as explaining the future, I have no idea what the future is. You know, I'm doing my best to try and understand this crazy kind of world we live in, and very much of this hack and try and experiment and share what you learn. Again, the session before, we heard from the Mexican school situation where they're saying quite reasonably, actually, we don't even have the basics sorted here in our schooling, so how can we possibly be thinking of adding layer upon layer of new technologies, the sort of free area, and sort of sort out some of the basics? It's a really, really sort of meaningful start point. But my approach at solving this is actually from the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like a coin that you turn over the other side, because my job is to understand which technologies are emerging and which are the ones that could be making an impact. As Rupert said, I work for Cambridge Assessment, so we do exams. We do all of the exams. My part does English language exams. And my role is to understand how technology and learning and assessing all intersect and how we can use tech to improve that. So a tiny bit of my own journey. So 10 years ago, the iPhone came out. Before that time, I was already doing mobile learning. So I was running an R&D lab here in Cambridge for a small publisher doing adult literacy, adult numeracy. And we were really on the kind of the real need end of the spectrum. We were trying to go outside mainstream schooling. We were trying to go to young offender institutes or to maybe FE colleges, training vocational colleges, but doing very low-level literacy and numeracy learning. So we were trying to go to places where there were no teachers, and there was really tiny amounts of money, and we were trying to understand what's possible with mobile and tech and reach out. And did quite a few apps, and some of them still fairly globally used. And then I was sort of transported to an entirely parallel universe. And this parallel universe was a big American corporate tech company who brought me in and gave me the opposite problem. There's an absolute abundance. I had this ludicrously huge budget. The aim was to push technology as far as it could go for the learning. It was corporate learning, internal engineers. And so we were building VR and games and augmented reality, and the cost wasn't the problem. The problem was to try and push digital and learning kind of to the edge as far as it could go, which was a fascinating experience, you know, and enabled us to create some enabled us to stop worrying about the problem of institutionally how you would roll this out or how it maps against goals or policies of education. That was irrelevant. What was relevant was, could you make some meaningful learning games, and could you find gains, and could you find slices and sectors where technology might play a role rather than needing a more embracing. So this was this sort of switch from, you know, need, no money, no teachers, nothing, to another end of the spectrum where there's infinite money and resource, and you just have to see what's the most excellent you could be with technology to try and showcase that. And I guess the reality for all of us is somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, right? You're trying to understand for any particular set of students, teachers, demographics, learning needs, what is the mix? Well, what is the sort of magic formula that we can weave together? And I don't know what the answer is, but I'll talk you through some of the things that we've been finding out. First of all, I want to introduce you to a rather strange creature, and this creature is not fully human. I don't know if you've come across these creatures yourself. This is my teenage son, and he's in a very typical position of studying for his GCSE exams, which looks like he's not really studying for his GCSE exam, but it's locked into his phone in some ridiculously comfortable clothes, which he should have probably got out of in the morning, and this is the afternoon already. So they really are a slightly different species, right? And you probably have the same arguments. My job is new technology, mobile. The house is full of tablets and gadgets and every phone from every era. And yet we fight about how much time he spends on his phone and trying to stop him, trying to get him to talk to us. So I realize I'm a bit of a hypocrite in this. But we had a really interesting argument which sort of helped inform my own perspectives. So put your hands up if you know what app that screen is from. Okay. Yeah, Snapchat. So this is Snapchat. And if you think of messaging, it's fairly obvious, right? Bunch of people, I've been messaging. He sent me this morning. So if you look at it, all of them he's spoken to within a minute. It says here, he sent a message a minute ago, a minute, 55 seconds. But that's not what's important. What's important is those little symbols down the side. So each of these symbols has a massive weighting. And it's got such a weighting that we argue about it. The weighting is, It's bedtime, he needs to go to bed, he's tired, he's writing exams, he has to spend 15 minutes every evening making sure that those symbols are right. So the flames mean, to look at Venus, 198 days in a row, he's sent Venus a photograph with a message, and Venus has sent him a photograph with a message. So that's 200 days, right? So these things carry a massive weighting, a sort of social weighting. So you can't break it. It's called a streak. And if you break a streak, that's massively uncool. 200 days worth of messaging to somebody, and if you just couldn't be bothered one day and you don't send it, you lose it. The whole streak disappears. And that friend, you both have to send it. So you really upset the friend if you break a streak. So this is so bad that when we go on holiday and we're away from internet, he gives his login and password to a friend so the friend can go in to just send a message. And in fact, a reasonable number of these messages, they just say, for streaks or something like that. So it's kind of, I don't really have anything to say, but we've got to keep this thing going. So it actually becomes quite a burden. So it's a mixture of a motivator and a kind of negative force. It gets more complicated because you also get a heart for the one, it's clear who's your best friend who you do the most messaging with and who's your second best. And he caused all sorts of awkward things where the one girl who was his best friend got dropped and wasn't the best friend anymore because you get notified. So all of these, the different icons next to it have different meanings, which are a huge deal for him. So this is streaks, and it's just an example of kind of a motivator. It's not necessarily good, it's probably a bit bad, but it's a deep motivator for him. Duolingo. So I almost didn't put Duolingo here because I really don't consider the learning quality very good on Duolingo. But what is very good is their thinking about the same ideas, the motivation, what gets you coming back again. So this is another friend. He's got a streak. His name's Ollie. He's studying Swedish. It tells you here how many points, experience points, and what level he's at. He's been going for 436 days. So that's a year and a half every single day. This guy has been doing at least 5 minutes on his phone learning Swedish. I asked him why Swedish. He said, oh, it's just kind of random. He thought he wanted a challenge, and he's in assessment, he wants to try learning. So he's been going for a year and a half every single day. Now, the learning might not be a great quality, but that's kind of saying something meaningful, right? Here it's showing us, again, this is from this morning, so these are his current stats. So it's showing how he's progressing. He's got 14 hours left to keep up to his streak today. And there's this kind of a leaderboard in Duolingo. It puts you with another group of people. And he competes continually with one or two others who are often at the top of the leaderboard. They don't have as long a streak, but they've got more experience points for doing more meaningful learning or longer pieces of learning. But so if you don't know what streaks are, and you're not kind of understanding these motivations, you're sort of missing something entirely when you're trying to understand what technology and learning is and how these things weave together. It's messy, it's not necessarily right, but there's some kind of real motivations there. So I don't know the answer at all, and the motivation is quite complex because is it extrinsic, is it intrinsic? Are you motivated to learn the language? Are you motivated to compete with people? And it's not straightforward, but we're trying to understand what we can do with this. So we're at Cambridge Assessment, we're trying the same thing. So we have a English language quiz game, and it's particularly about challenging people. We're trying to understand what's the motivation of competing with somebody else. So it's a free app. You're very welcome to try it. It's called Quiz Your English. You can play at people. You can challenge specific people. So down here is a list of kind of content packs you can buy. So again, this is from this morning. So I just went in and I challenged a random player who's a Spanish guy. And we played a game. You can see it's just literally sort of multiple choice, fairly simple questions. But I've got various sort of game mechanics. I can double points, and I can do various things with it. And up at the top, it shows the scoring. So the scoring is a bit time-based. So the quicker you can answer it, the more points you get. And it's points and coins. So it's a fairly classic game type of idea. But we're trying to understand, this is sort of for good. It's worthy questions we've created, and can you generate enough demand? And the answer is, you certainly can. So last month, we had almost 50,000 people playing games. The number one person last month played 6,500 games. Just think about that. 6,500 games somebody played in 1 month. We reset the leaderboard every month. So this was previous months, because I forgot to take a screen grab at the end of this last month. But so it's clearly some kind of, for certain learners, it's tapping into some kind of motivation. And we're just trying to understand what, what we can do with that, how we can make use of that to try and harness better learning. All of these starter examples are examples that have nothing to do with the classroom and nothing to do with the existing class context, and it's more about what technology can do. So here's another one which we're particularly excited by. So we do exams. That's what we do. We create the exams, we mark the exams, but because of that, we get a lot of people coming onto our website to find out about the exams, to get practice, or some learning resources, or practice things. And these number of people are quite a significant number of people, and it keeps growing to an extent that we're slightly overwhelmed. So this is just a world map from one of the MOOCs that we run, and we asked the people who were coming into the MOOC where you came from, and they placed sort of arrows on a map. And we were quite taken aback, because there's lots of regions there where we don't have offices, where people don't even do our exams, but they were coming in. And so we kind of got quite fascinated by just this vast number of people that we have no possible way of actually knowing who they all are. We have 5 million people a year log in and use some of the tools we've built to sort of practice tests. 11 million Facebook followers on a couple of groups that we run. So these are ludicrously large numbers of learners who, if we can just get things right, you can actually help their learning, even though we've got no context about who they are and what they are. So I guess that the thing here is about technology for reach. So Ben, you asked a question about what happens if you have more and more students and the teachers, a fewer pool of teachers who are reaching larger students. I'd almost challenge you to take that to the extreme and say, what happens if you've got millions of learners who you're not able to serve? Sub-Saharan Africa, refugee camps. Go places where actually you can't serve at the moment, and there start thinking about what are the things that technology can do that's an improvement from what they've got right now. I mean, I sort of quite like approaching it from the other side. Does that make sense? So we don't really have an answer, but we're tracking very closely what's happening here. We collect a lot of analytics from the different learners in different places. We're trying to draw threads between learners who interact with our different things. But here's another kind of reach. So I mentioned the refugee camp scenario. So there's one part of our site is just free learning content. You can drill down and find things, and it's on our website. But we became aware that for large numbers of people who really need this free content, they might not be online. And there's a variety of very well-meaning initiatives that use things like Raspberry Pi to build these super tiny computers in a box that get distributed into remote areas, or little Wi-Fi routers with content embedded into them. I don't know if you've, has anybody heard of Rachel Offline? Put your hand up if you know what it is. Ah, cool. Okay, so Rachel Offline is pretty awesome. It's a sort of informal collection of people who donate their time, a bit like Wikipedia, to get permission for and create offline versions of all of these things. Project Gutenberg, loads of books, Khan Academy, maths things, Wikipedia. So there's whole offline versions of Wikipedia that you can download the whole of Wikipedia onto your laptop. The usual plan is you put it onto your laptop and you put a Wi-Fi router and you put it in a remote place, and people can connect to Wikipedia from their phone without any internet. That's the sort of the deal. And in fact, you don't need to put it on your computer. You can put it in one of these boxes, which cost $50, $30, that sort of price point. So it's a whole kind of, back to your Carla's guerrilla sort of talking, it's a guerrilla movement of people donating their time and putting their content in special ways that can reach out beyond the edge of the internet. And so we realized that this is another opportunity that we're missing out on. And so we've been contributing to this project. QX is the name of one of the initiatives that tries to package it all up, so you can get packages. But Rachel Offline is the sort of central aggregator. It's very messy when you go there. It's just lots of people volunteering time. So again, this was about technology for reach beyond the internet. But in our case here, what was new for us is we weren't controlling what happens. It's just an ecosystem. We're putting our content into this ecosystem, but beyond that, we don't control it. It just radiates out. We don't know which project's using it. We don't know what devices they're using it on. And so we were trying to understand our role in this bigger, messier ecosystem. We're just interested here in understanding what could computers do if you try and go into a deeper vertical. If you're trying to, we're already training them to mark our exams. Could you train them a little bit more to actually be useful for a learner? That was our sort of, the reason I wanted to put this here. it's helping one teacher support a wider group of students. It's giving a student some access to some starter support before they submit a result. But it's also a really good use of the same technology that we use for parallel auto marking, that we can also use it for doing for sort of giving students feedback. So this is a different problem. What I'm doing here is I'm just jumping around to quite different technology pieces that we're working with at the moment. This is Google Cardboard. Google Cardboard is a virtually free set of goggles that you can plug your phone into that lets you do 360-degree video. The problem that we were trying to address with this is speaking test anxiety. So there's fairly strong evidence that for some students, the experience of doing a speaking test with a native speaking examiner is highly stressful, and that for some of those students, being highly stressed makes you perform worse than you would otherwise. It's a fairly strong sort of correlation. There's also a fairly strong correlation between people who are phobic about things, afraid of spiders, of heights, of crowded spaces, being able to desensitize with virtual reality type of environments. You could put people in a virtual reality of the underground train and slowly add more and more people that it's more and more crowded, or you can, and it really does help. The sort of behavioral therapy of desensitizing really does help. So our thought here was maybe we can create a 360-degree video of our speaking exams so that people can desensitize and they can practice. So I do have a little video clip I can play you if my kind friends up there can switch it over.
We wanted to do something that was futuristic, if you like, and also something that would have a good customer outcome and something that would allow customers to have a chance to practice.
I really like the experience. You can really practice your speaking test like this. It's a more fun way to learn language, and I think it could be really effective.
It's pretty cool and fairly simple. So the idea is you film a total panorama 360 video shot, but when you view it, you're only viewing it in a normal window. So it lets the viewer move around inside the video and look up, look down, look all around you.
We decided we'd try 360 videos so that candidates could immerse themselves in a speaking test and have the opportunity to practice and possibly improve confidence and motivation.
I think it's really good for people who just started learning English, because they are maybe a bit insecure to go out and talk with the people, so they can first experience all the stuff on the phone and then go out.
Hello, my name is Maria and I am about to take my Cambridge English speaking test. Come along with me to get a sneak preview at what to expect from the test day.
We already know there's a big potential for virtual reality. It's been successfully used in other contexts to reduce anxiety. So how can we look at what we can do about it?
Ready for your exam?
Yes, I am.
We need to go upstairs.
This is really going to help increasing validity of our exams, because what we want to do is in the speaking test to make sure that it's the candidate's best ability that is captured in the test and it's not reflective of their anxiety.
As a student who is taking an exam, it would be very useful for me because it can make me feel comfortable for my exam. Yeah.
Please take a seat.
We're really excited about where this could take us. Partly because the price point is low, so it's the kind of thing that anybody could have on their phone. And partly because we think this could be the first step to helping really immerse learners in another reality. The best way to learn language is when you're there, when you're surrounded by another country, another place, other language speakers.
The feeling is to be there with them or in that situation. You don't feel to be in a room, you feel outdoor. It's perfect. Yes, yes.
And we think with these VR 360 video pieces, it's the first step towards helping learners immerse themselves in another language, both so that we can help teach language better and that we can help assess how learners are coping better. Thank you. So does that kind of make sense? So the cool thing with the 360 video is it's fairly inexpensive to create. I'm not sure whether Paul spoke about it when he was talking earlier, but he's doing some super cool things about teachers filming themselves teaching and trying to use it as a way of reflecting on what's happening in the wider class while they teach. And it's a sort of becoming a technology which ought to be almost disposable in its ability to create and use and just build a digital literacy around using it. So we're just really experimenting with this. We've had very strong results so far in testing it out with groups of students. We haven't made any public pronouncements about it yet, but if anybody's interested, they're all available there, and you're very welcome to play and try it out and use it with students. I mean, we'd welcome feedback at the moment. We're trying to understand how much of an impact it can make on this test anxiety. So I guess the main thing that the main sort of message I wanted to share with this is that it seems to me that we're surrounded by this sort of rapidly evolving ecosystem of very fragmented tools. I mean, none of these things I showed you join together. They're all clearly of interest in learning and could have an impact, but none of them particularly connect into one neat, unified set of things. So that's tough for teacher training. Where do you even start? There's just new tools coming all the time. It's tough for kind of classroom management because it's not one set of things that you're making everybody do. It's a sort of messy world. And it feels to me that that's just the reality we're in. It's a thing it's very tough to escape. Suggestions, please. How do we cope in this fragmented world? Any suggestions? Paul?
I think it's just let your teaching philosophy guide you. So however you understand teaching and learning as taking place in your particular context, let that be your compass.
Nice. Okay, so that's let your personal teaching philosophy guide you and don't be overwhelmed by the flood of new things. Just be true to what you're trying to do as a teacher. That was a great suggestion. Another one. Yes, Carla.
I think that allowing spaces again to students, because they generally don't have a voice, and maybe they can help, like the teachers,
very good.
To decide what is the setting and what is the digital tool that might help them to solve their own.
Very nice. Okay, so Carla was turning it over to the students and trying to learn from the students as part of professional development. So my thoughts were actually a cruder kind of thing. I thought your one approach is ignore it, and the other is to try and fight it and think you'd stop it, and the other is to try and do the things, the fantastic suggestions that have popped up here around building new skills, maybe creating some scaffolding to help teachers or to help classrooms, but to maybe help to simplify some of the narrative around how you use technology, but ignoring it and fighting it are sort of pointless, but that seems to be shared. So is this familiar, SAMR? So it's I'm not quite sure how widely used it is, but it's a very cool guy, Pontedera, and his model of how you use individual technology and getting it deeper and deeper into your teaching practice. So it's sort of substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. So it's sort of fairly obvious, but it's where you're using the technology to do a thing you were doing precisely as a teacher. You're using it to supplement something you're doing as a teacher. That's the augmentation. And so at these levels, it's sort of enhancing existing classroom practice. And then as you get deeper into the tech, you start using it to do things you couldn't do as a teacher. And that's a sort of, it starts modification and redesigning the tasks. And then it goes into this total redefinition where something's happening that actually would have been impossible in the previous construct. And it's the sort of stages of a maturity of an individual technology. And I like it just because it gives you a sense of the different roles that any given slice of technology might play in a classroom. Even if you pick something fairly simple like email or Google Docs or something, like you could come up with a story for Google Docs where really it's just a word processor replacing you writing something on a paper, but actually to it being a collaborative writing task with students across the world and building something quite considerably different with the same tool. So and I guess the sort of perceived wisdom is that there's an educational, that there's a benefit in working up that list. That if you pick a tool and as you spend more time with it, it actually starts to influence your teaching practice a little bit more. I guess my thought is that there won't only be one tool. It's messy, it's fragmented, there's lots of tools, and it's sort of maybe a bit like this, that as a teacher you've got several different things you're trying, and some of them are more established and they're more embedded, and others are new and emerging, and you're testing it and it might break. So to Carla's sort of hacker idea, or sort of Paul trying to test out new things. So really it's about thinking of the technology that you might use in a class as a portfolio of quite mixed variety, and some are safe and certain and always work, and some are a bit risky, and some you're still learning, and some you've quite established. So really to try and think of managing tech as a looser portfolio. And across that portfolio, you're trying to understand how to get better at it and how to weave it more closely into your teaching. So that's my one thought, is whether there's by thinking of a portfolio, it's actually a way of simplifying. Another is the language you use when you think about the technologies that you. So we do a lot of teacher sort of training. We have several teacher qualifications. We run quite a lot of webinars and sort of teacher outreach stuff, free resources as part of that. And there's always a conversation about sharing reviews of products. Which things are good, which things are bad, why are they good, what are they good for? And so as part of that, we've been doing quite a bit of work trying to come up with what are criteria, if it was like eBay, or if it was like Amazon, if there were some sort of stars that said if it's good or not. How do you know? How do you know if something's good? And because you might know for one slice, but you might not have thought of something else. And we found that actually teachers use very, very different language describing whether they like something or not if you pick different sectors, and even within one country, if different maturities of using a tool. So they like it for very different things. And there isn't really a good single set of words about what makes a good tech or not. So we've started publishing some reviews. We sort of reached out to teachers and got them to review products, got a couple of people to review products. And as we're going, we're building up a set of questions and questions to ask and collecting feedback. So what would be the questions you ask? These are all ones that are either already public reviews or some on the way, so, which is why we put them there. And they're the ones that the teachers are coming back to us quite often and saying, yes, we like that, here's why we like it, this is the thing I do with it, start to share. Quite often the discussion starts off just being about the teaching, the learning task, the very specific learning task. But then it widens out into other facets of that, into the user experience. It doesn't work on all the different devices. And so there's a sort of set of questions you could ask around the technical details. You know, what type of phones does it run on? Does anyone support it? Does it work offline? Is there inappropriate collecting of my students' data? There's all these sort of quite important questions, but you don't necessarily think of asking them. Equally on how good the learning is. You know, does it give you feedback if you make a mistake? Does the content get harder and harder and harder to match your level? Is there sort of meaningful progress possible? On the user experience, is it easy to use? Is it fun? Does it kind of compete with Snapchat and with the tools that are already on their phones? And so we're sort of extending out these sets of questions. So again, if anybody's interested in how you evaluate, ways to evaluate, please chat to me, or we're very happy to get you involved in this. It's sort of a project at the moment. It's part of a site that we're launching to try and understand how to do this better, called thedigitalteacher.com. And it's just free resources for teachers trying to get better at digital, but it's not, we're not dictating any answers. It's really about sharing best practice. This particular picture was trying to understand what are skill areas as a teacher that you should be looking at. Typically, the obvious teaching digital discussion tends to be around delivering learning, or maybe evaluating learning in our area. We're all assessment, or possibly the designing in this sort of cycle. But the teacher operates themselves in a digital world, and they're classroom management things, or the wider world, collaborating with other schools. There's a bunch of different skills, and so we have this framework of 6 different skill areas, and for each one, we put together a sort of self-assessment model that you can try and understand where your skills are, or how strong you are in each area. So again, we'd very much welcome feedback on it. We're using it at the moment. It's live. We're trying to get feedback on these 6 items. We're hoping it can be quite a useful way of reflecting quite broadly on where there's gaps, or in the broader sense, where you could be building new digital skills. So this is all part of the product review stuff is on there, the self-assessment stuff's on there. It's free, it's just us trying to understand how to support digitally better, because we have all of these teacher qualifications, but they don't particularly go deep into digital. They're trying to be abstracted from the tools you use. And we're sort of thinking maybe there's something missing. So this is our other side of the message, is trying to understand what are the digital skills that the teachers need, and how to get there. So I guess my main message is, if I'd love to know if you think it connects with you, is to try and, in this fragmented world with very diverse bits of technology, it's to try and think of a evolving portfolio of experiments or of hacking or trying things out, some which are safer and surer, and some which are evolving. Some that you, as Carla was saying, work with your students to help figure out how it works, some which are kind of prescribed by the school and are used across the school, but to really see the role of an educator in this world to be constantly trying out some new things. The second was that there's maybe value in trying to build some new vocabularies in how we talk about quality, digital effectiveness, digital impact, what that looks like. Because I think there's some different words and different approaches to the pre-digital ones, but we're not very mature at talking about that or seeing what's good or bad. And the third is just repeating the message that all the panelists were saying earlier, that there are some different skills required. It does need you to be a bit more of a hacker, maybe identifying some of the zealous enthusiasts and giving them freedom to expand. We recognize that as part of the university, as part of the teacher qualifications, that sometimes our voice carries quite a weighty message, and so we're wanting to use that to set out the message that it's okay to be that hacker teacher, and it's okay to be experimental. That's good practice. So that's our part of the deal. We're trying to help share that message, and we'd welcome other people's feedback. And that's really it. I just want to say thanks for your time.